Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 296, cover dated January 1993. And this is part 9 of X-Cutioner's song, moving into the third and final act of the crossover storyline. The cover itself here by Brandon Peterson, inked by Terry Austin, featuring Stryfe looming over Cyclops, Jean Grey, and who is the mysterious baby. And to the right of the cover we have the Skybox card that was included originally in a polybag with this issue. So the particular card this issue features Scott and Jean at bay, and drawn by Andy Kubert, coloured by Paul Mentz. And let's take a look at the text from Stryfe's strike file here. In my, if my plans continue apace, I will have had the opportunity to face you, to speak with you, to wipe a tear from your eye. All the things you never had the opportunity to do. I hate you both for that, for denying me that which you owed me, that which every generation owes the next, a chance to love, learn, to grow from the wisdom of its forerunners. But I learned a completely different set of lessons without either of you, mother and father of the mutant destiny. Tonight, the child of tomorrow's hate will destroy you both. So who is Stryfe is a mystery that is implicitly resolved in this issue. Never outright stated, but pretty implicit as to who he is. And let's get to that by opening up the issue to the splash page. So the story here begins in medias res, in the middle of things. The title of the story is Crescendo. And the creative team is Scott Lobdell, writer, Brandon Peterson, penciler, Terry Austin, inker, Chris Iliopoulos, letterer, Joe Rosas and Marie Javins handling the colour in this issue. So it looks like Jean has been blasted by the Dark Riders, and it looks like they're both in trouble. Cyclops with his optic visor, ruby quartz visor, off his eyes as well, and our narrative caption says, "This is a portrait of exhaustion, hopelessness, and finally despair." But is it? Let's turn the page to a double page half splash. So it was all a ruse by Jean and Scott. Jean wasn't out cold at all. She was telekinetically holding back Cyclops' optic blasts, something she, when she was Phoenix, or when Phoenix was her, used to do back in the John Byrne era. And so doing it again this time to fool the Dark Riders, and Cyclops blasting them away. And very interesting little bit here in the narrative caption, which is that Cyclops is cursed with uncontrollable optic blasts. We all know that. But did we know this? Capable of pulverizing adamantium. Very interesting that. That means that Cyclops could take down Wolverine, yes? So the two continue to make their escape, but the complex they're in appears to go for miles, all of it looking vaguely familiar. So a bit of a hint there as to exactly what might be the location of Stryfe's base. Then another one of the Dark Riders attacks them, Mainframe. And this is a little mystery for Scott here, another of Apocalypse's henchmen, but why are they serving Stryfe? And Mainframe explains that that they serve the first among mutants, and that this is a mantle Stryfe recently wrested from their former master. So that was shown in X-Force 17. And then so wrong number here by Bob Harris. Bob Harris, infamous for giving wrong issue numbers in his editorial footnotes, and doing it once again there. And then so Scott and Jean, using their powers together, make a great escape from Mainframe and have time for a smooch in the middle of it all. So pretty cool anchor image here by Brandon Peterson. And let's continue. We're going to have a switch of focus to Stryfe, who's sat upon his throne of villainy. and he is watching on computer monitors Scott and Jean's attempted escape, and he reveals that he is allowing this, and in the end he says their predictability will destroy them as surely as it destroyed me. So what's he adverting to there? Well, we'll find out more as the issue progresses. I've always loved this anchor image of a close-up on Beast's face, but also an even greater close-up on his magnified eye there. It looks pretty cool. As I said, I really enjoyed it when I first saw it, and I still do to this day. So we're in the X-Mansion. We're in the infirmary under the mansion, and Beast has removed the bullet, the bullet that was the vehicle of the techno-organic virus that is ravaging Professor X's body. He's removed it, and Moira McTaggart's computer just broke the virus's binary code. But what does that reveal? Well, it's going to come up on screen, and it turns out to be Stryfe mocking them. His text saying, "You are smart, but I am smarter," over and over again. And this really angers Beast. But as he says, it's like a child's taunt. And Lorna thinks here that maybe Wolverine, Bishop and Cable, who are working together, might be helpful in finding out the location of Stryfe's secret base. So that's cue scene shift to Graymalkin, Cable's ship that orbits the Earth. And here we have the trio looking over a holographic display of the key events of the assassination attempt on Professor X and subsequent events. And they are trying to discern what it all amounts to. And the 2 pages here are meant to a recap so far of the main events of the crossover as well, for any reader who might be picking this issue up and not have any of the previous ones. And then we get to the whole business of the question of Stryfe being out for vengeance, but why, against whom, and for what? And Cable's computer, the professor, suggests perhaps a display of the key elements to date. So we get this composite display of the key elements. One element missing, Cable himself. So here we have it, and Bishop sums it up. Cable, a general without his troops. Stryfe, a man from the future obsessed with the past. Apocalypse, stripped of his honor guard, as the professor is nearly stripped of his life. Finally, Scott and Jean, the heart and soul torn from the body that is the X-Men. Find out what these disparate players have in common, and we found the key to defeating Stryfe. And that's what they ponder throughout this issue. Then our scene switches back to Scott and Jean's escape attempt as they make their way through this endless complex, as it seems. Nice use of screen tone here by Terry Austin. And they stumble upon this baby held aloft by these metallic cables. And who could it be? Maybe it looks familiar to readers of X-Factor, issues 65 to 68, perhaps. But then we go back to the X-Mansion, it's nighttime, and Apocalypse seems to have been afforded an opportunity to heal before they talk to him again. So he arrived at the X-Mansion at the end of X-Force number 17 with a proposal to team up with the X-Men. So here are the leaders, Havoc and Storm, waiting to talk to him. And Apocalypse says to them, "I can do what you cannot. I can save your sacred Xavier." But Storm says to him, "Your service is in exchange for ours, as you have said, but in the goddess's name, why should we trust you?" And Apocalypse makes the rational point, half your number are in prison, that's X-Force, or have fallen in battle. Frankly, child, you have no choice. So that's interesting. So they put him down in the danger room for his healing period. And in now walks Archangel. And in the very first part of the story, Uncanny X-Men 294, Archangel vowed to kill Apocalypse. But here he is vouching for Apocalypse's ability as a master of mutagenetics. And he says he once infected Scott's son, Nathan Christopher, with a virus, which resembles the one threatening Charles. So that happened not in X Factor 68, but it was the last time that we saw Nathan Christopher when he was taken into the future. My wings, gifts from this madman, are techno-organically derived from his own shape-shifting cells, for better or worse. Though I loathe to admit it, I am living testimony to his genius, twisted or otherwise. He may be Charles's only hope. So they take Warren's word for it, and they bring Apocalypse to view Professor X. And Apocalypse has a little moment with his former horseman Death, that is Archangel, referring back to the time when he was Death. That's X Factor issues 23 and 24 in particular. And he asks Archangel, "Why not slay me, son?" And Archangel replies, "I am no more your son than I am the angel of death you sought to turn me into." As I said in X Factor 23 and 24, when I do kill you, and rest assured I will, it will only be after you've suffered the way I've suffered because of you. It will be at a time and place of my choosing, not simply because the situation has presented itself. So basically, he is promising Apocalypse here to murder him. And it's going to be in cold blood, by Warren's own words. Now we're back aboard Graymalkin orbiting the Earth, and Bishop Cable still trying to figure out what's going on with Stryfe, and in particular, where is his base of operations. And just pay attention to this, what Wolverine is doing here with his one pop claw, doodling on the surface of the table. And they're working through the options that Stryfe isn't at the mansion because Cerebro would have pegged him. Is he here on Graymalkin? The professor says similarly, I would have detected him. And Wolverine concludes that it'd leave Apocalypse's base of operations. So Graymalkin, or rather the professor, starts scanning, focusing on California, Egypt. Wolverine continues his doodling on the tabletop. We'll see how that pans out. And then we switch back to wherever Stryfe is, and Jean trying to remove the baby from the metallic wall of cables. And Jean discerns with her psychic powers that what does she say here? She says, "I don't need my psychic powers to know how difficult this is for you. It's hard for me too." It's as if Stryfe knew we played out a similar scenario not that long ago in relation to Cyclops and Madelyne Pryor's son, Nathan Christopher, all the way back in X Factor 68. And she asks Scott, how could he know? How could Stryfe know about all of this? And Cyclops thinks, yes, how would he unless he was there? So they're trying to remove the baby, but it's not completely possible. And Jean can sense a thought pattern in the baby that he's alive. And then Stryfe appears in a holographic projection and declaims, "Alas, a state of being he, the baby, will not enjoy for much longer. This child's mind has been genetically linked with my own consciousness. Similarly, his body is interwoven with the life support system of this entire complex." So Cyclops says, "You're saying we're powerless to stop you without hurting the boy, you son of a..." Well, we can fill in the blank. "How could you?" asks Jean, hiding behind the life of an infant, Stryfe. "You misunderstand," he says. "I hide behind nothing. Rather, I invite. You have the opportunity to rid the world of the Dark Riders, this apocalyptic tomb of pain and misery, and me, simply by destroying the child." It's that old philosophical question of, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do so? Would you kill a baby in order to prevent all the things that adult Hitler did? So will they, in a version of that, a twisted version of that, destroy or kill or harm this baby in order to stop Stryfe and the Dark Riders? But they reject the invitation. As Jean shouts, he's insane. Stryfe gives them 30 seconds to make a decision. and then he sits back. And it's interesting here because he's doubting himself now, and he's projecting onto Zero, who has a blank face, but he says to Zero, "You're beginning to annoy me with your questioning expressions, Zero. There should be no doubt they would sacrifice the life of the child simply to save themselves. My death an added incentive. I can guarantee they would do this and more. You see, it happened once before," he says quietly. So all the hints and clues here that Stryfe is Nathan Christopher. Yes, it's implicit in all of this, but no one states it outright. So Scott and Jean decide that they have to give themselves up in order to save the baby. Scott is blasted here by Mainframe, and Stryfe says, "It's not an option. You have to destroy me. Destroy the Dark Riders. You even have time to flee the complex before it explodes. Surrender is not one of your choices. Kill the child, kill us before we kill you." And the Dark Riders are racing towards them. So they're under extreme time pressure here to make a snap decision. Stryfe is beginning to look aghast at their choices. They're fighting back, he asks himself. And we're told in the narrative captions, long before they'd ever met, Stryfe believed he knew all he needed to about Scott Summers and Jean Grey. He was wrong. It is not a realization which comes easy to this man, or more importantly to the child within him. Hint, hint. He has spent a lifetime hating them for a multitude of sins he can no longer be sure they committed. Their actions this day have put a lie to his memories. His resolve has been replaced by doubt, while his hatred is all that he has left to call his own. And he does look distraught in this anchor image here. So Scott and Jean hurdle the guard railing here, and Scott uses his optic blast to blast through the wall, and then, shockingly, they're yanked outside of the structure by a vacuum. So what is going on, and where is Stryfe's base? And this is even as the baby, quote unquote, reverts to its original form, a vessel, so not an actual live baby. And now, this is an issue here for the production manager. Really, what we needed was an ad or something to ensure that we didn't have a page turn here giving things away on this, on the right hand side. We needed this to be on the right for a page turn to this concluding splash, but in any case. So Bishop, Cable, Wolverine, they're working through the options as regards where Stryfe's base could be. Professor says the gene scan is negative. A global search might be, and Bishop says a waste of time and resources. Wherever he is, Stryfe feels safe, out of reach, confident. If he's among his enemies, says Cable, we've ruled out the Professor, myself, and Apocalypse, so where on earth could he have taken Scott and Jean? That's it, says Wolverine. It's why Jeannie hasn't been able to fire off a psychic cry for help till now. They're in the last place X-Factor battled Apocalypse and his Dark Riders. Don't you see, people? Look what he's been doodling on the table. They're not on the Earth at all. They're on Apocalypse's base, old base on the moon. And now they're out in space with no atmosphere, no oxygen. How on earth are they going to get out of this one, yes? And a great final page by Brandon Peterson and Terry Austin. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this review of Uncanny X-Men 296. The story will continue in X-Factor number 86. If you enjoyed the review, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.